Thanks very much. Broadcasting from the World Economic Forum 2015. And there's so many issues that affect the African continent. And the reality is it's not only about the economies of scale that's being discussed here. Everything that pertains to the lives of those living in Africa are under discussion. Education, perhaps, being one of the biggest discussions and one of the biggest things that needs to be fixed and rectified here on the continent in order to better the lives and move the continent forward. Well, one organization that is doing exactly that is called the Varkey Foundation. But if you haven't heard about the Varkey Foundation, you're going to have a newfound respect for this organization in just a few minutes. It actually runs one of Africa's largest teacher training programs with an ambition to train 250,000 teachers, impacting 10 million children, and that's a fantastic aim. Now, they've taken on the call by UNESCO for governments to commit 20% of their budgets to education and are urging businesses to be more proactive by significantly increasing their investment in education initiatives in areas of the greatest needs. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this, and joining me now is Vikas Pota, who is the CEO of the foundation, to talk about a lot. But we're going to start this discussion with, I suppose, what we could possibly call breaking news, because this was announced yesterday that the Vickers family, the Varkey family, are actually going to be donating over $1 billion to different causes through education.
You can say yesterday was a very exciting day in our journey. The Varkey family, who have set up this foundation, yesterday took something called a Giving Pledge, which is an initiative by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Warren Buffett to encourage billionaires to become philanthropists. And so Sunny Varkey and Shirley Varkey, who are the founders of this organization, yesterday took the Giving Pledge.
Unbelievable, $1 billion. Is it primarily towards education?
Yeah, I mean, the Giving Pledge is about pledging the majority of your wealth over your lifetime or through your will towards good causes. And because we've set up this foundation that's focused on education, I certainly hope that the money will come to the foundation.
Tell me more about the Varkey family. Their origins, you say they stay in Dubai, but what made them come up with this foundation and their particular interest in education?
Well, you know, it's a process. The Varkey family's origins are from Kerala in South India, and they moved to Dubai almost 65 years ago. In that period in Dubai, when it was a desert, they set up one of the first private schools there to cater to the expatriate community, and since then the organization has grown. On the 50th anniversary of the organization 5 years ago, they decided to actually institute a foundation that looks at leveraging all the know-how and all the experience of running great schools for the wider world, and that's what the foundation's aim is. So we focus on actually building the capacity of the teaching profession, and one of the things that you mentioned and you referred to was actually training teachers. Yeah. So in Uganda, for example, over the last 2 years we've trained over 11,000 teachers. We're about to embark on a big program in Ghana. But most excitingly and interestingly, when you look at education, everyone is interested in the subject, especially in somewhere like Africa, where we're expecting this takeoff, but not enough is being done to revolutionize how education is delivered in this continent.
Yeah. Business-backed education. I mean, you're here at the World Economic Forum. This is the best platform to promote something like this. Talk to me more about that.
Well, the business-backed education pledge and the campaign was simply to rally the private sector to back education initiatives. So if you look at some research that we conducted this last year, you'll find that companies through the corporate social responsibility programs actually fund healthcare 16 times more than education. But when they come to the World Economic Forum and other conferences, they speak about education and skills. So there seems to be a disconnect between what they're saying and what they're doing. So the campaign encourages businesses to actually commit at least 20% of their CSR money towards education, which today currently stands from the Fortune 500 at about 12%.
Okay. I mean, do you think it's attainable? Do you think that that's something that they will commit to, 20%?
It's like motherhood and apple pie. Why wouldn't they? Yeah. If they're going around the world experiencing issues regards to their skills base, regarding recruiting the best employees, you can't really make these statements without recognizing you need to invest in education and skills.
It would make sense. I mean, you're investing in the future of your country, of the youth, which is through education. Now, you say the gap between education demand and provision is rising. Let's elaborate more on that. What do you mean?
Well, there's a hunger and a thirst for great quality education. and there's a recognition, not just in Africa, in many parts of the world, that public systems aren't delivering. And so we have to look at in terms of what the rising aspirations of people are and how education systems keep up. The OECD, which is a think tank based in Paris, has actually come out with a report that says out of 76 education systems that they categorized, Ghana and South Africa come at the very bottom. And they said that if every child receives the basic standard of education as defined by their governments, in South Africa, for example, there'll be your economic growth would grow by 2,500%. I mean, that's a massive fillip, and I think everyone deserves jobs, everyone deserves to do better, and one way of doing it is by fixing your education system.
Yeah, indeed, it certainly is. When you look at the education system here in South Africa, what are your impressions? I mean, what is your overall perspective of it?
We find pockets of excellence everywhere, frankly speaking. So to characterize an entire education system as being broken, I think is unfair, as is often the case. Our foundation came up with an intervention called the Global Teacher Prize, because we want to celebrate and fight for respect for teachers. If we accept that the teacher is the biggest lever in any change, we have to invest in the teaching profession. And in South Africa, you have some great teachers, and we'd like to encourage through your channel, in particular in this interview, for African teachers and South African teachers in particular to go to www.globalteacherprize.org and apply for this $1 million prize to an individual teacher.
Amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Just let's wrap it up by talking about your numerous interactions that's going to be taking place here at the World Economic Forum.
Sure. I mean, we come to the World Economic Forum to speak to business leaders in particular and to government leaders about how we can actually reform education systems. So we've got this marriage between finance ministers, who you were interviewing just before here. Education finance is a big issue. The world is arriving at this momentous time to discuss what the next set of goals are, which are the Sustainable Development Goals. The big issue is actually how do you finance for them? How do you make sure we've done a good job in getting everyone into school, but how do you drive the quality of education? And unfortunately, money is where the answer lies, and that's why we need to engage all these stakeholders more effectively. So I'm here at the World Economic Forum to speak on this and to lobby and to meet people to get an understanding for myself, but most importantly to impress that you can't speak about economic growth without focusing on education and skills. I asked a simple question at the World Economic Forum: how many education ministers are here? You've got finance ministers, energy ministers, telecoms ministers. Where are the education ministers?
Yeah. Good question. I'm wondering if there are any. Well, I'm going to speak to the organizer in a short while. I'll find out if any of them have RSVP'd and are going to be here. But my gut tells me not too many are going to be putting in an appearance here. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for talking to us. Vikas Pota, who is the CEO of the Varkey Foundation. And yesterday, hearing news that the Varkey family have donated $1 billion through the foundation to help education and other causes around the world. That's just absolutely fantastic. Let's take a break. We'll see you after this.
My goodness, absolutely imperative. The role of education in growing the economy in South Africa.